The ethanol industry is reacting this week to an in-depth report from the Associated Press regarding U.S. ethanol production. The AP article was released during a week many expected would yield new renewable fuel standard numbers from the EPA. At the time of this taping, that hasn't happened. About a month ago, we told you how leaked EPA documents indicated the agency would scale back RFS requirements, including cutting the corn-based ethanol mandate possibly by 1.4 billion gallons. Ethanol has a huge home in this state. Nebraska trails only Iowa in production. Todd Neeley covers the industry for DTN and joined us Thursday to discuss the AP story and the future for ethanol in the U.S. The Associated Press article has many angles, but to summarize, it says ethanol isn't as green as it's being billed, the U.S. government has changed its message on the fuel, and CRP acres have been a casualty of the renewable fuels rise. I started by asking Todd if this was a fair assessment of the ethanol industry.
You know, I think looking back at this story, it really brings up a lot of issues that have been at the forefront when it comes to ethanol and bioenergy. You know, clearly every fuel is not perfect. I mean, you look at what's going on in the Balkan, in North Dakota, there's a lot of issues surrounding fuel production in general, but I think what the AP did, it really caught a lot of people off guard. A lot of people in rural America who, you know, by and large farmers are very conservation minded. Not all of them, but in general they do what they can to conserve the land. And so I think this piece and all, it probably missed out on a lot of opportunities to really talk about the issues. It seems more of a, you know, just the timing of it with the release of at the same time when the EPA is talking about cutting back the renewable fuel standard, it really has raised a lot of questions.
That conservation question is a big one, and the AP, according to its numbers, it's saying that around 7 million acres have left CRP from the time that the RFS was enacted in '07.
Right.
How much of that can be attributed to corn, and how much of that can be attributed to a dwindling CRP program or a CR program?
Right. I don't think that there's any good data out there to say what causes this to happen. What we do know is that in '08, the Farm Bill had capped the number of conservation acres, CRP acres that were allowed in, and I think primarily some of that drop is directly connected to that. You know, have farmers in some areas planted corn on certain types of land that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have? Yeah, I'm sure that's probably happened. But I think to look at CRP and say that this drop in acreage in the program is directly related to ethanol probably doesn't take into consideration all the other factors that play into it, market factors, other things.
You cover the ethanol industry. What has the response been like from groups within ethanol to this AP piece?
Yeah, they're very irate, you know, to say the least. I think a lot of what I've been hearing is that they felt that from the beginning, they were trying to get their side of the story out to AP, providing academic studies, making experts available, industry people available, everything that a reporter could basically ask for. And in the end, a lot of what they provided was not in this series that AP released. And so I think that's the big thing. They're on a roll right now trying to make up for some of the damage to the industry. You know, putting out, you see a lot of stuff on social media, you know, a lot of fact-checking going on within the industry. Whether people in Washington and the policymakers are listening, I guess that's still to be seen. But I think it's the outpour from rural America on this has been incredible so far.
Obviously, this came at a time when it's relevant because the EPA is considering scaling back, according to leaked documents, the RFS, and you've probably developed a very close relationship with the spokesperson there asking about those numbers.
Yeah.
They haven't released them yet, but what do you think they'll look like when those numbers come out?
Well, I think what we've been hearing so far, everything points to EPA cutting back the volumes for next year. Now, that's not to say that it's going to have immediate direct effect on the ethanol industry, because there's still some talk that with corn prices falling, you know, ethanol margins have recovered somewhat too, and so there's still a good hint that what's going to happen next year is really not going to come as a result of the RFS. It's more of market factors, and so we're likely to see the industry as a whole still meet the production mandate on the RFS either way.
So to speak, the demand would still be there, even if the RFS, let's say hypothetically, would scale back corn-based ethanol to 13 billion gallons. If the demand was there for 14, they would produce 14.
Absolutely, and there's already talk about exports. Where those would happen, it's hard to say. Maybe Brazil, but I think in the short term, ethanol is going to keep moving on. It's just the long-term effects of messing with the RFS that I think the industry is really alarmed about.
Explain a little bit more about that. What does this mean long term?
Well, the biggest thing that we're seeing now, there's, in 2014, we're going to see cellulosic ethanol production come online. Just to step back a minute, the big thing about that is that a lot of that industry relies on what corn ethanol has already done in terms of infrastructure, know-how, all these things that go into producing ethanol. And whenever you have a government regulation or a government program that's put in place to kind of send a market signal to investors in cellulosic ethanol that, hey, we're here to support you, and then you start to mess with that program, it really makes some of these companies think twice about the U.S. in terms of what they're doing. We've already heard some of the big players like Abengoa, Poe at DSM, all these companies that are building plants and thinking about the future. They're already starting to question whether long term the RFS is going to be there for them, and so it's really put more doubt into the advanced biofuels more than anything else.
And some doubt into ethanol as well?
I think somewhat, although ethanol has really fairly established itself, corn-based ethanol, and so I think even messing with the RFS, a lot of markets are established and a lot of relationships are established, and I think those will still stay intact.